Welcome back to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and for tonight's game, the final home game of the season, the final game on the virtual season ticket, I am joined by Colin Watt and Laura Bradburn. Welcome back to the show. Colin, you missed this afternoon's show, the dial-in, but you're back. Talk us through this team.
Yeah, it's an interesting lineup. We're seeing Barkas return to the frame. His first start since January 20th in a 2-each draw at Ammanvale, or the Tony Macaroni Stadium, or the Spaghetti Ad, whatever one you want to call it. He's played only 13 league games this season, and in that time, he's made 6 clean sheets and conceded 10 goals. So maybe not as bad stats as many people think it out to be, but you're kind of hoping that he'll pick up a clean sheet tonight in this game. Going with a back four of Kenny, Welsh, Ayer, and a debut for young 18-year-old Adam Montgomery. We'll discuss him later on because he's playing in a position that he's not really frequented very often when he's come through the academy. Looks as if we've only got one holding midfielder in the star man tonight, Scott Brown. Star man, not necessarily for his performances, but it is his final farewell. A 4 in front of that, I can see a Forrest, Turnbull, Christie and Elyounoussi with Odsonne, Edward up front. Bit of a change of shape. Be interesting to see if that is how we line up.
Before I move on to Laura for Laura's thoughts on the lineup, before we get into some of the tastier topics of today that have actually happened after this afternoon's bulletin, Colin, we'll be talking to Scott Brown tomorrow. What would you like to ask him?
I did put a suggestion in the chat that we should ask him that if he had a pet, would he rather have a dinosaur-sized dog or a dog-sized dinosaur? I mean,
Laura,
nobody's really going to ask him that question. It's unique. He'll remember
Laura,
that.
He's one of the greats. He's in the 600 club, not just the 500 club. He's won 22 trophies, captain Celtic to some incredible, glorious victories. Could you come up with something a wee bit more sensible?
Well, I could come up with something more sensible, primarily because everybody would rather have a dinosaur-sized dog, so it's a stupid question anyway.
Ooh, interesting. Which kind of dinosaur?
Oh God, who knows? I've no idea. But as far as Scott Brown's concerned, I think my question for him would be to round it out. You know, what is his single most favourite game that he's ever played in for Celtic? Because there will be a few there. There will be the game he scored, obviously, against Rangers and gave birth to the Bruni, if you want to put it that way. There will be the famous night we beat Barcelona. You know, there's a lot on the list there, and I would just be interested to see, of all the memorable games he's been a part of, what personally would have been his favourite. Because I have a feeling that he might come up with something that none of us would have thought about, and that would just be interesting to know.
If I get the chance to be kind of not taking the mickey there, I would ask him really about his relationship with Tommy Burns, and that relationship that was kind of built on the fact that even on Burns' deathbed, he sent flowers to Scott's sister Fiona. So it would be interesting to find out more about the great man and the relationship they had and what impact that had on his career.
Yeah, brilliant shout, Colin. Brilliant shout, because I was talking a lot last night about Tommy Burns. There will be a special ACSOM Bulletin broadcast on Friday. So some fantastic stories being shared about Tommy, and a lot of players who in actual fact surprised even Tommy Burns' family when they were saying how big an influence that Tommy was on their careers. Guys like Bobby Petr, Stan Petrov. And I remember, Colin, you might recall this, or you might have been busying yourself elsewhere up at Greenock CSC, Paddy McCourt even talking about the impact of Tommy Burns when he went to Celtic, and the fact that all the players were still talking about how influential Tommy Burns was to their careers as well. So yeah, that's a great shout, actually, brilliant shout. I think being a fellow Fifer, having driven through Hillabeath many times and seen the beautiful statue of Jim Baxter on the left hand side of the road as you drive in, I am still maintaining that we need to get another statue up there. Just to even the balance. And yes, it would be the Bruni, Laura, so I don't know if that's going to be an ACSOM fundraiser in years to come, but I know that a few of the Celtic supporters clubs in Fife have already discussed that, got off the ground. I was surprised, I think, over the last couple of weeks, and it's probably because of the season we've had, Laura, that some Celtic fans were questioning his place in the pantheon of greats, as a legend at Celtic Football Club. That's unquestionable, surely.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm probably a good person to ask about this because, as I've said many times on this podcast and at various other points, I'm quite far from Scott Brown's biggest fan, and by that I mean, sometimes his temperament wasn't ideal. I don't think he's the most gifted footballer we've ever had at the club for obvious reasons, ability-wise. But I don't see how you can look. I can separate that and say I don't see how you can look at his contribution over the last however many years he's been here, the trophies that he's won, the impact that he's had on the team. You can't deny that, and whether you rate him as a footballer or not, whether you have any other issue with him of any description, he will go down in Celtic history as one of the greatest captains ever to lead the club, and I don't think that's questionable. I think, we talked the other day about on the game coverage last week about Charlie Nicholas's comments, and I don't know what the reasoning was behind those, but I can firmly sit here and say that even though my opinion of Scott Brown isn't as high as some others, I completely disagree with it. He is and always will be a Celtic legend.
He comes in to Celtic as part of a great crop of players. I've got to say a great crop of players because that crop at Easter Road, Colin, was hugely impressive. And there's a lot of Celtic fans I've spoken to who actually fancied Kevin Thomas over Scott Brown at that time. I think we got the right man, I've got to say. Time has proven that. But he's played under every manager since Gordon Strachan, and I think that I would be interested to know, and he's going to be loyal and he's humble when spoken to Scott Brown, so he wouldn't want to upset anyone. I would be interested to find out who had the biggest influence of all the gaffers he's worked under as well, Colin. Who do you think got the best at tune out to Scott Brown?
I'd have to say Brendan Rodgers did. When you look at it, before Brendan Rodgers came in, there was so much discussion on whether Scott Brown would stay at the club. Was it time for him to move on? You weren't seeing the Scott Brown that you knew you could get on the park. Although he was the captain, his influence wasn't so kind of assuring throughout the team. And then when Brendan Rodgers came in, it was like a complete rebirth. We got probably the best years of Scott Brown's career out of him whilst Brendan Rodgers was the manager of the club. And I think he'd done that to a couple of other players as well. So, I mean, that's the testament of bringing a good manager in to get the best out of players. It's interesting. I think back to when Scott Brown signed for Celtic. I actually remember it was announced when Scotland were playing in the Kirin Cup.
And he was
Japan.
wearing a terrible pair of jeans. That's one thing I'll never forget. The jeans. Have a look at the picture, where he's walking in with the Celtic top on. The jeans were absolutely dreadful.
Stonewash flares, I think they were.
Shockers. Absolute shockers. The thing with that as well, though, just to pick up on one of your points, Colin, the dip in form, I think, coincided with this senior player revolt around Ronnie Deila. And I've got to say that when I look back, obviously I'm going to enjoy all the successes that Scott Brown's had. But that's one thing I wasn't happy about, is the fact that he should have been the guy that didn't allow that culture to creep in, Laura. That's the one thing that, when I look back on the career and Kebab Gate and all this kind of stuff, he should have been the guy to stand up and make sure that didn't happen. He should have been the senior guy who was able to pull together people like Chris Commons and Charlie Mulgrew and others and say, well, actually, no, he's the gaffer and we need to respect that.
Yeah, I would have hoped so. Whether, looking back on it, whether he had any particular issue with Ronnie Deila himself that caused him not to do that, I'm not sure. He didn't really come to the fore as a great captain during that time. I think perhaps, I'm always concerned when I think about, I can't remember exactly the wording David Turnbull used, but he talked about the influence of Scott Brown on him and said something about, I think he said he had great banter or something like that, and you just think like maybe that was more the influence he had on the dressing room. And don't get me wrong, that has to be valued. You have to keep a spirit there. You have to keep spirits up, especially in a season like this one. But maybe that wasn't the right thing that was called for at the time. But I mean, in the grand scheme of things, that's one era amongst a number of other ones, and even during that era, he still helped bring success. So even though he might have fallen short in some senses, like I say, there's no taking away from him what he's achieved. You don't play for Celtic for as long as he has and remain in the team for as long as he has without being a very good player and, in his case, an even better captain.
I think one of the interesting things we've managed to see as Celtic fans is the maturity of Scott Brown throughout his career. If you think back to when he first signed and he was there with Gordon Strachan, European nights, like when Gordon Strachan was managing the team, you knew that Brown was going to give away a daft foul or a yellow card, and he got himself sent off on one or two occasions as well, and you're going, that's just the maturity of the players not fully developed. But you've actually saw it. He came in as sort of a young boy and he's leaving to go on to be a coach. You don't get to see that with a lot of players, and it's incredible that for my generation we got to go on that journey with him.
Yeah, I mean, going back to, we'll return to Scott Brown, because obviously tonight is the kind of tribute night for Scott Brown, final time that he'll be leading the huddle at Celtic Park, unless he starts doing it with Aberdeen, which I doubt. What do you make of that team, Laura? As Colin said, Barkas is back in goals. I said that when John Kennedy took over, he should start playing Barkas, he should start playing Ajeti, so that we can make a decision on whether or not they're going to be part of any rebuild next season. Anything else you're looking forward to, looking at that lineup?
The thing that's standing out for obvious reasons is Montgomery, just to see. I personally haven't seen an awful lot of him, so the chance to get to see him for hopefully the majority of the 90 minutes will be something to be excited about. We've been crying out for some of the younger players to get a shot in the first team, and although it's come as late in the season as it has, you've got to take the opportunity while it's there, and hopefully he can not be a flash in the pan and stamp a place, or at least put himself in contention for next season. I'll be interested to see how Brown performs, obviously, with this being his last match. Hopefully he's really up for it. And talking about Barkas as well, I still don't think we've seen the best of him. I still think that there's something there. I think the whole situation with the goalkeepers, as I've said before, has been completely mismanaged. We've somehow ended up in a situation where we have 3 goalkeepers who've all ended up with their confidence through the floor, either through mismanagement or through single errors or poor performances. Given the amount of money that we paid for him, given the fact that he's a Greek international and he's played at a high level in Greece as well, there's got to be a player in there, and hopefully this is the start of a new era for him, as well as the end of obviously the Scott Brown era. Yeah,
absolutely. And 2 left backs on the bench. Sorry, Colin, you were going to come in to say something there.
Yeah, I would have quite liked to have seen Brown lead out a kind of young team of academy players tonight. I think that would have been a sort of fitting tribute for him to captain the side one last time. A lot of these players have looked up to Scott Brown as they come through the team, and he'll be there to have given them coaching and guidance. And let's be honest, this is dead rubbers. I mean, there's nothing gained out of the fact that we're going to play St Johnstone tonight. It's 3 points on the board. It doesn't make any difference in terms of the league table. It doesn't make any difference in terms of Europe. Now, if I think back to, and I've said it several times on here, the first Celtic game I ever went to was Celtic playing Dundee United in the 99-2000 season, last day of the season, the day that you always remember because Henrik Larsson had a moustache. But you think of the average age of the guys that were playing that day, I think was Mark Fotheringham was the youngest player at 16 years and just over 100 days or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
There's guys still in that team that could have come on and played tonight. I mean, you've got Stephen Welsh at centre-half, UNO2's loan deal at Clyde's now done, he could have come in there. Luca Connell, Karamoko Dembele.
Sorry, any excuse to get Luca Connell in there, Colin.
No, but seriously, that if you're going to play guys like Montgomery, you could have brought more young players through. Dane Murray is someone else that's been training with the first team as well.
Aren't there, the loan deals might be up, but isn't there a contractual thing up to the end of May, something like that, Colin? I take your point because, I look at that and I think, well, Montgomery's coming in, brilliant. I'm always for youth getting. The only problem at this present time, I think, is that we're playing St Johnstone, who obviously, they've got guys that are playing for their cup final places, if you like, and they're going to be up for it for that reason. They're a handy side. They've done so well this season. And you know what? I just think that it could have actually got embarrassing if we were to throw, cobble a side together that didn't have that experience on this occasion, Colin.
Here's an interesting one. This is the second time Celtic will have lined up against Bobby's Lamal this season for 2 different clubs in the same competition. He was the goalkeeper at St Mirren when they were going through the injury, the COVID crisis, whatever it was. away back at the start of the season, and now he's the emergency goalkeeper for St Johnstone tonight, so it's the second time we've come up against him. Ali McCann, someone that John Kennedy's come out this week and said that the club were interested in potentially signing, not playing tonight. So yeah, I can see St Johnstone have kind of missing a few key players and they've made the cup final, but I don't think it would have been as bad as that. I generally do think young boys with a lot to prove, why not give them a go?
I'd have been more keen. I'm not dismissing that in any shape or form. I'd have been more keen though to maybe play Dembele from the start, or maybe Johnstone from and give these guys a game. But obviously he's been playing it safe since he got the job, hasn't he? There's a few other things to discuss, Laura, before we get on to the big fallout between the Green Brigade and the club, which has dominated really social media since the photos emerged. I'm not sure, did you catch this afternoon's bulletin with the Great Pantheon 1-8? Who had a lot to say about the Neil Lennon, in defence of Neil Lennon, in actual fact.
Yeah, I caught a portion of it. I mean, he didn't surprise me in anything that he said in terms of if you're going to come out and defend Neil Lennon. He took the same line that a lot of people have taken over the season and gave a lot of the same excuses that Neil himself has given at various points throughout the season. It was obvious through the discussion that he was there to defend Neil Lennon because, as you said on the show, we want balance, we want discussion, we want people from every side of the argument to come on and have their say. Having said all that, I still felt that those arguments that he did put forward, or the ones that I saw, certainly were kind of didn't really make up for the season that we've had, and probably could have a few holes picked in them if you had a bit more time to do it.
I just think there's a few blind spots with these arguments. Anybody that's defending the decision to go to Dubai, I just think all these months later is quite incredible. I still, maintain the fact that, you might have had players who wanted to leave at the beginning of the season, but it is the manager's job to make sure that, you are able to blend a side together. Which has been bolstered by new signings which didn't work out, and the reasoning that they're all fully grown men and they need to deal with it themselves. If that's the case, you wouldn't have a manager. The manager's there to fulfil a certain role, and part of that is to ensure that people are performing to the best of their ability, Colin. One of the big things, again, talking about the criticism from Celtic fans, during the week I suggested that Wednesday would be a good day to announce Eddie Howe. Tomorrow we've got a fans forum. We've got a fans forum tomorrow whereby Dominic Mackay will be actually addressing Celtic fans. And I felt that at that time, and also I had heard that there would be an announcement. What do you make, Colin, of some news outlets, some mainstream news outlets, saying that it's a deal, a done deal, and the announcement maybe hasn't been made, but he's got the job?
I think this is something that is almost an open secret, that Eddie Howe was the number one target. He's been won. I think Stephen McGowan's put his hat on it for the last couple of weeks that he will be the next manager of Celtic, going as far as saying if he only had £10 left, then he would put that £10 on Eddie Howe being the manager. So I'm fairly confident that it will be him that is the new manager, and it's a great signing. Anyone that hasn't done it, once you're finished listening to us, and if you don't want to listen to the Celtic commentary, go and listen to Graham Hunter's interview with Eddie Howe and listen to how he talks about his mantra towards coaching, how he talks about that he has an individual training plan for each player, how he tries to coach the best out of each player, and how he's the first one on the training ground and the last one to leave at night.
That sounds like me and my role in ACSOM. Quarter to 10 I left last night. No, I wouldn't say that. Quarter to 10 I left last night, Colin. So yeah, I feel his pain.
But when I think of that and then I compare it to some of the kind of statements we've had from Neil Lennon earlier in the season, basically saying how maybe we've overcoached them, maybe we should do some training on free kicks, on set pieces, whether we should do some shape training, maybe we should video analyse things. This is things that are just taken for granted by the sounds of what Eddie Howe's saying. This is just something he does as standard. He then goes a level above that. So that's what we're looking for a coach. We've mentioned this before. We're not going to go out there and sign 12 first team squad players this summer. and you're going to lose probably 12 first-team squad players this summer. We're going to go and sign 5 or 6. We'll maybe sign another couple that are on the verge and need developed, and then you're going to have to look to what's left to get the best out of them. If you're going to have to be in that position, you want someone who can coach and get the best out of the players. Now, for me, I don't think you'll find a better manager than Eddie Howe to do that.
No, I totally agree with that. Now, over the last week, Colin, Laura, we've been speaking about the catholification of modern football. Tongue-in-cheek, of course, tongue-in-cheek. Some people took that to mean that we were bemoaning the use of data analysis, which is pretty far from the truth. I think it's pivotal. It's an element of the game that's never going to go away. If anything, it's going to get more of a focus. There was a mention today, Laura, in that contribution earlier from Great Pantheon 18 that Celtic had not used the video analysis right up until December. They were unable to use video analysis properly up until December, Colin. Did that surprise you when that revelation was made?
I have to admit, I've been so busy today, it's the first I've heard it. But it doesn't surprise me hearing that, because it's what has been said in press conferences. I think the one thing you have to say for Neil Lennon is he has been fairly honest. He does come out and he does say what is happening. Like, he came out and says, we're not doing training, we're not doing this, we're not doing that. He came out, and when you listen to his press conferences, even the kind of infamous one earlier in the season, there was still a lot of truths, even if it was what you didn't want to hear. It was like, right, okay, you've said this is what happened. It shouldn't have happened, but at least you've been honest to that point. So the fact that it's came out that we didn't do video analysis, tied in with the fact that we saw the contract with Dahu International that we were talking about in previous bulletins, it doesn't really come as a surprise that we haven't been doing that.
Now, if anyone's wondering, obviously, why you're placing so much emphasis on, a random supporter from Twitter, I just think listen to it. Look at the fact that it's anonymous, and there's obviously some kind of effect on the voice, and just join up the dots. But there was a few other things as well that I pushed on in relation to David Turnbull, who Colin has alerted us to the fact that he is the Player of the Year and the Young Player of the Year. And I think much deserved, Laura. We'll talk a wee bit about David. And I pushed it for the fact that he didn't feature, really, until the game against Lille, when he was kind of thrown in with Sorrow and Hazard. The reason given for that was it was basically managing him back from injury, even though he'd been playing for Motherwell pretty frequently prior to that. Laura, what about the impact of David Turnbull, and what can we expect to see going into a season which we hope would be, with a manager like Eddie Howe, with all the different attributes that Colin's already described? Under a manager like that, David Turnbull could really shine for the Celtic side. Yeah,
I'm going to listen to the Graham Hunter interview with Eddie Howe, but the other one I would recommend people listen to is 20 Minute Tim's did a really good podcast with a Bournemouth supporter, and if you don't come away from that feeling enthused about the fact that Eddie Howe is possibly coming in, then I don't know how you're going to get excited about it. I think David Turnbull is exactly the kind of player that will benefit from high quality input and coaching from somebody of Eddie Howe's calibre, because what you've got there in Turnbull, and I don't need to emphasise any more my thoughts on David Turnbull. He's by far my favourite player in the squad at the moment. I think he's probably, along with perhaps James Forrest, the most naturally gifted footballer that we've got at the club. I think that if you combine that level of talent, look what he's been able to do this season in a team that has floundered around him. If you have a manager come in and give him the input and the guidance that somebody like Eddie Howe can, combine that with the ability that David Turnbull's got and the football brain that he's obviously got, and he's just going to go from strength to strength, I think.
Yeah, before we speak about the Palestine display, how good is Mika Lustig, Colin? How much do you miss him?
Oh, just watching that there, that's impressive.
It was when he was talking and he had that thing at the end where Pfeiffer say "eh," and he tried to put that in. Did you notice that? He was trying to put it in with his Swedish accent. Brilliant.
It's like listening to, obviously, Lustig, someone that's came over, played, knew exactly what it meant to play for a team like Celtic. Didn't start as a fan and left as a fan. That's what you want to have as an impact on players that come here, and it's fantastic to see it. But yeah, he's probably better without that kind of the baldy cap on. He doesn't quite
He's
suit that, does he?
too good looking for that, isn't he? Now let's. Sorry, on you go, Colin.
What was quite funny though was seeing Brendan Rodgers on the Past the Paradise there in his Leicester outfit. That's a bit of rubbing salt in the old wounds.
I know, Colin Chuck 67, thanks for joining us via YouTube. Our board proving again they're not fit for purpose. The sheer incompetence of their actions today and this season is immeasurable. Free Palestine. And there'll be a lot of comments coming in such as that, and it's not as though we're ignoring them. The question would be, I think today, Laura, is that overshadowed really, the tribute to Scott Brown, do you think?
Listen, I thought a lot about this when I saw it at lunchtime. I was aware of the fact that I was coming onto a platform where there are thousands of people watching. I'm not going to be naive enough to sit here and voice an opinion on anything political or otherwise when I'm not very well educated on it. All I will say is the banners were supposed to be for Scott Brown's final performance. They were supposed to be reflecting his service to the club. Anything that doesn't reflect that, whether you agree with it or not, regardless of what your view is, if it's not to do with praising Scott Brown for the service he's given the club, then on this particular night it didn't need to be there.
I was just saying, if they wanted to be cuter, they could have had a big montage that if you skewed your eyes, you could see Scott Brown, but it was in the colours of Palestine. That would have worked, and I'm pretty sure it would have been difficult to take it down. I have got serious issues with the club. I think I've heard quite a few of them. And yesterday, my big issue, and we'll return to this, Colin, was around their treatment of former players, because I'm a great believer that a club like Celtic, a club of our stature, should definitely have something in place for the men who gave us the success. And I'm talking about people who have really struggled during the last year, to the point where I've been hearing stories that, they really are. They'd break your heart if you heard them. And these are guys that have played for Celtic and successful Celtic teams who have struggled so much over the previous year, and there is no function in place that supports them through the club. And before anyone says we've got an FPA, I'm sorry, but no, they're not supporting them either. And I just think that if I'm ever given an opportunity to speak to Dominic Mackay, I think that's one of the priorities, and it's become really, highlighted for me over the last year that we don't do enough for them. Former players aren't about wheeling them out whenever there's an anniversary, or you want to interview them for a DVD or the Celtic View, or there's some kind of event you want to sell tickets for. It's all about ensuring their well-being. And these people are getting to an age, Colin, where they need that assistance, as do many of their widows. And I just think that it's become really apparent over the last year that that function is not in place.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, what you've got to remember is it's human beings we're talking about. Is they're not just former Celtic players. It's if you saw anybody in need, your first instinct as human nature is to help them out. And the fact that Celtic have got the resources to do that, and from what you're telling me they haven't, that takes away from the ethos of what the club was founded on for me. You think about it, go right back, Celtic was founded to feed the poor of the East End of Glasgow and the Irish immigrants. Now you've got former players that you're quite happy to talk about the history that they've done for the club, and in their hour of need the club isn't there for them. That's a sad reflection on the kind of standard that we're seeing coming out of the club now. And I can only hope for these players that times will change and they'll come back on their feet. And if there's anything that Celtic fans can do to help them, or if anybody can do to help someone, just be kind to each other. That's all you can ask.
Yeah, I mean, people might be thinking, you're just looking for any reason to have a dig at the Celtic board at the moment. But it is something that over the last 24 hours became really apparent to myself. And, it's you look at some of the examples of smaller clubs, much smaller clubs in Scotland, who have thriving former players associations, which are set up as charities and ensure that former players are engaged with. If they have got addiction issues, then they are assisted through them. If they need to go private to get treatment, they get that. And, it's something that we have absolutely dropped the ball on. Colin, you're laughing. Are you watching the Past the Paradise here?
Yeah, I've just saw Peter Lawwell come on to the park to award. I don't know what it is. It looks like a silver plate. Do you know what it looks like? Do you remember we discussed this earlier in the season, and I think it was part of the charity fundraiser, just going back to the sides of charity, was
like
the
a
Palmex
salver.
Day testimonial plate.
Yeah, silver.
Very similar to that.
Nice. Well, big night tonight, Laura. We're going to enjoy our last game on the virtual season ticket. All change after tonight. How are we going to watch the Hibs game next week or at the weekend, Colin? Going to have to pay for it. PPV. One final thing, Colin. Big game for the women's team tonight.
It is a big game against Glasgow City. It's a top of the table clash after Celtic moved into the second place of a 3-0 victory over Motherwell at the weekend. And I believe we will be covering it tonight, is that right?
We'll be covering the half-time and full-time, but unless I get home at midnight tonight, I don't think we can wait until the absolute end of that game. And some people will obviously be away to their beds by then anyway, Colin. So let's go to the action, and we will see you again at half-time. Thanks everybody for getting involved in Twitter, Facebook and YouTube, and we'll see you again in 45 minutes.
Hail, hail.